Welcome to the Talking HealthTech podcast. My name is Peter Birch. This is a pretty iconic episode, number 500. It's rare that we call out the numbers of episodes these days because we're pumping out so much content, but we thought we'd pause even just for a little bit at the start of 2025 to celebrate this milestone because recently, I don't reckon we've been that good at Talking HealthTech at celebrating milestones. We've been so much in the doing phase and the, dare I say, making it happen. So rather than just me riffing for a little bit about Talking HealthTech and where we're at now and where we're going from here in this episode, I thought I'd bring along some of the hosts that you've heard on the show that have been conducting some of the interviews as well. So g'day to Nathan and Sophie. It's great to have you here for this episode.
Thanks, Pete. Good to be here.
Thanks, Pete. It's feeling odd being on the other side.
Yeah, look, well, it'll probably be a bit of a three-way conversation. It's more of one of these, let's banter for a little bit and reflect for a moment because, like I said, that's not something that I've done particularly well probably in the last 12, 24 months is like take a couple of minutes, even if it's 30 minutes to just kind of reflect and then look at what's going ahead because you know, Talking HealthTech's been a little bit of a journey. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Regina and Ruby, who have also been hosting a number of episodes on this podcast. I've got this random theory and a rumor that I'm just starting now that people thought that I was Regina and you were Ruby, Nathan, and we could never be at two places at the same time, but to try and diversify some of the content. But unfortunately, we can't dispel that rumor in this episode. That was a random one, but they no doubt they will feature on some of the episodes in the coming weeks and onwards. But it'll be interesting to see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, like when you and again, the part of the challenge was me juggling things. I stuffed this up with one of our earlier booking dates. So look, I'm glad we got here in the end.
We tried to book this about 6 months ago, and we've just got it on the buzzer ready to release for episode 500. So we'll take what we can get.
Yeah, but it's been funny, like reflecting on how much it has all changed and grown. You know, from just being your voice, Pete, to I think when I kicked in, I was trying to look back over it before we started. I think I was in the early hundreds when you did me a favor and I was first kicking off some of my projects. And it's just, it's been crazy watching it evolve. I mean, I'd love to hear from you, Pete, like just give you the chance, what's been happening and what does the future with Talking HealthTech look like? Because it's been a wild ride, I got to say.
Yeah. Well, look, there are some that may have listened in at some of the early stages and maybe people have listened since episode 1. Pretty sure it's just my mum that's listened since episode 1, but there could be some couple others too. So some might be familiar with the journey, but I'll try and summarize it. And it's always easy on reflection too in some of these. So I've always worked in healthcare and technology, not a clinician. I'm the only co-host of the podcast that doesn't have clinical experience, by the way, so I'm underqualified. But I used to do a lot of community radio and other things relating to media and stuff like that, but kind of just on the side, not related to healthcare. So then, as I'd done a lot of roles in larger organizations, doing emergency assistance and running bricks and mortar clinics around Australia, this is in the early 2010s to 16, let's say, I then shifted across to the health tech startup lifestyle and haven't looked back since, and started at what was an early startup then called Medi Records, who are going very strong now, a cloud-based practice management system. And that was very much one of the first hires, at least as general manager, to put the business around this great product and, do the sales, do the service, fix the Wi-Fi, take the rubbish out, all the things you do in an early stage startup that many can resonate with. And we had some good success there, particularly with some larger enterprise deals. And then I went across to a company called Meta Optima that I'm still somewhat involved in, at least from a distance now. And that was in 2018, doing all of the helping doctors diagnose skin cancer using artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that was, I guess there was some hype around AI at that time in 2018, but nothing like it is now. And they're continuing to grow globally, and it's great to watch what they're doing here. So I've been very much involved in the industry, I guess, as a vendor since about 2016, 18, I forget the dates, but for quite a while now. I'm still on the board of the Medical Software Industry Association and also in other industry bodies that relate to that. But the podcast has started back in 2018 because I remember distinctly sitting on a plane going, I really want to dive into the digital health space more because I feel like with all the one-on-one conversations I'm having, it's a really interesting ecosystem, a lot to learn. But hey, podcasts are a great way to do that. Who's doing the podcast in Australia around this digital health technology space? Couldn't find anything specific to health tech, but I did come across Dr. James Somaru's podcast, which was called something different at the time, but it's now the Health Tech Podcast. And Dan Kendall, who does the Health Podcast Network. So they're both based in the UK, but Dan still sounds very American. But so I thought it was an American podcast. But the two UK shows, Dan is focused more now on the podcast network. So he helps the Health Podcast Network, which Talking HealthTech is a part of, helping all these creators doing audio content at the time, making shows that resonate. And James and I have been connected ever since. And I was messaging with him saying, it's a really interesting show. He was in the early 10 or 12 episodes or something. And so I feel like he's kind of like in that metaverse of health tech. He's that alter ego, but he's, again, more qualified and a clinician and does some great content. So it's been cool keeping in touch with him. It's gone from doing this occasional podcast in audio format, which originally were recorded in person in Sydney. So it was whoever was within a 15-kilometre radius willing to come and have a chat. And then we hosted an in-person event at the co-working space that I worked. And because there was a few other health tech companies there, we thought it'd be interesting to see who would come along. And, we can do a live recording, and it was just audio. It went really well. But then COVID happened, and then we were like, okay, let's pivot to virtual, as everyone does, and audio podcasts again. At the time, that was just when everyone was kind of getting into podcasting, because what else are you going to do when you're sitting at home and need to have a conversation? So we were doing 4 episodes a week, I think, during peak pandemic of Talking Health Tech. It continued to grow. All these opportunities started coming up around putting a business model around it, which I hadn't really thought about too much. I really just saw this as an outlet to try and improve my understanding of the digital health space a little bit more, and maybe make myself... I remember writing a note to myself saying, if it means I can be a little bit more employable and command a slightly better salary, then that's a success. I don't think well, I guess I am employable, but I'm not going to be employed by another company for the foreseeable future, because I am very much full-time Talking Health Tech and have been since 2021. But it was very much me doing all the editing, doing all the guest prep, doing all the everything. But I'm well-versed in being the doing person, so that fit nicely, and enjoyed, the production side as well as the healthcare side. But since then, we've continued to grow the team. We've got a production team of 8 people now behind the scenes. So they rarely get a shout out to Jewel and Jazz and Paula and Josh and Monica. And hopefully I've not forgotten someone. If I have, we can add me in using AI afterwards, maybe. But actually, I want to talk about AI content at some point if we get time. But if not, maybe that's for episode 1000 then. But and of course, we've got the likes of you guys with Nathan and Sophie and Ruby and Regina starting to do interviews because it got to about episode 400, I think. I'm gonna guess that I felt like whilst there was a lot of positive feedback around me as a host, there's only so many times people can listen to me riff on stuff at in the same way. So to be able to get some different voices and perspectives has been super helpful. And also really helpful as things opened up after the pandemic. I was thinking, well, what's this, what does this look like with Talking Health Tech? We do a lot of virtual stuff. Is there space for this podcast content business thing that we've built in this world where it's probably going to go all back to being in person at events? And what's happened is we've just continued to grow, and the event side has been even more powerful for us to be able to then partner in with a lot of the big events, not just here in Australia, but across the world. And you look back in the back catalogue and all of the big events that are happening, we've either done something with or we're planning to do something with next year as well, which has meant my passport has certainly got to work out. But that's been really interesting to get international perspectives on topics. But I'm really big on making sure that stuff still resonates for an Australian audience, because if you're an Australian creator or like technology vendor, or if you're even from a clinician's point of view, we're kind of this funny size in terms of population and total addressable market that you've always got to be thinking with global in mind. So being able to go out to some of these places and speak to some of the innovators and understand what some of the challenges are, it then can be put in the context for an Australian audience and then go, okay, well, maybe we can lend some of these ideas. Maybe we won't do that because, as we've seen in other parts of the world, it doesn't gel. Or maybe we can borrow some ideas as well. So that we're just, I'm going to pause for a second here because that whole journey has been pretty wild. I'm not the youngest of spring chickens anymore either. So this entrepreneurial startup lifestyle wasn't the most sensible idea on paper when I started it. With 3 kids and a Sydney mortgage in your nearly 40s when I started going full time, it didn't seem like a sensible idea. But you do these things progressively, and I was really fortunate to be able to kind of like slowly step my way out of some of the core employment things I did. And we're at a point now where it's only every couple of days as opposed to a couple of hours that I stress about whether this is a going concern. But generally, I say that a little bit tongue in cheek. Generally, it's been going really well. I'm super excited to see what 2025 brings.
No, I hear you, man. I got to say the entrepreneurial lifestyle thing, that's been one of the things that's been interesting to watch me, to my own experiences evolve over the last couple of years. Particularly, I've been involved, the early days when we first met and started talking, it was Nathan working as a nurse in a stable healthcare system with some cool ideas, trying to do a bit of a PhD, do some research and grow some stuff into, the Frameless boys offering me to join them full time, and same thing, 3 kids, Sydney mortgage, and it's been an interesting ride as well. But it's been great. I got to say, like the thing I really love about the Talking HealthTech network and this sort of portfolio career that I know Soph will have some reflections on as well recently, was that you do have the time to do these sort of interesting things. And some of the opportunities and the people I've gotten to meet, just whether it be through interviewing or whether it be through going to support local events or whatever, you've got that capacity to sort of stretch your wings and explore some of those other areas that, the stable employment may not have enabled in the same way. So, yeah, I mean, I've been just thinking back on some of the really cool stuff I've seen evolving in the healthcare space, and so genuine friends I've made through some of this stuff as well. The guys at Five Faces, and when I had a good sit down with Nicole and what they've been doing to actually just a genuine passion to make the experience. We see a lot of patient focus, which is great. What I love about the Five Faces guys is they're thinking about just people's engagement, whether that be family or carers or whatever. These people just genuinely using digital and technologies to make people's experiences better. I mean, you jumped in briefly on the AI space before, and it has been a bit of the flavor of the month, flavor of the year or two at least.
Yeah.
But actually just seeing some, when I first got involved here, we're doing a lot of stuff with Frameless around AI-driven conversational agents for training clinicians how to talk to one another and, doing some work outside of healthcare. But, some of the people I've met, like just the genuine geniuses I've had the opportunity to meet through Talking HealthTech, the guys out at Trial Key when I got to do that, and just seeing what they've been doing in predicting the outcomes and guiding the development of clinical trials is just gobsmacking, and the accuracies they've been able to achieve by ingesting so much. I mean, the virtual blue guys and quantum. I mean, I interviewed Peter, and we had a good chat for a while. I still don't entirely understand everything we were talking about, but where I got to was pretty amazing in some of the stuff that they're able to do. It's just an exciting time to be around. There's lots of existential stuff we're seeing, whether it be through financial markets and crashes, and man, it's not the best time to be selling into healthcare at the moment, I got to say. But there's just so many pressures, but there's so much exciting and cool stuff happening as well. And I don't know, that's been one of my reflections. It's just how much good is still going on out there, and how many people are still passionate about making the health of our patients and of our society better. And that's just really awesome in my books.
Yeah. No, I think that sums it up nicely because, when I look at Talking HealthTech and the multiple small businesses we run within this small business, a lot of them are focused on, there's the production side and there's our own content and then there's the community piece. I think it all needs to tie together because, to your point, the regardless of external markets or the sentiment from customers and things, it's the people that are super passionate about. If you wanted to make, money, you probably shouldn't be working in healthcare. Like if you want to make exorbitant amounts of money, there's other ways to do it. So if you're going to be in it for the long haul, you've got to be doing it for other reasons beyond just the financial side. And the people that we get to speak to on this podcast is next level. I'm super grateful that we've been able to build a business model around it so that, we can keep it as a going concern and sustainable and continue to grow and get out to more places to do these conversations, to bring value back to the ecosystem, but hopefully then bring value back to those guests that appear on the show. And we definitely planning for 2025 to continue to work with partners to make sure the conversations we're having on this podcast resonate and come from the right places too, because there's that interesting balance between, if you having conversations with vendors, everyone wants to sell in, but it's, the purpose of this podcast isn't to listen to 15, 20-minute, infomercials or anything. It's really to understand the problems to be solved, hear some of the impacts. And in this media landscape in healthcare, just anywhere, a lot of the times media can be focused on, I've never thought of talking health tech as media, but we get put into that bucket a lot. The media landscape can focus a lot on, these are the things that are wrong and that someone needs to fix. And there's very much it feels like someone's, it's like the two old men from the Muppets up on the grandstand saying, well, this is no good and this should be better. Whereas from a talking health tech side, that's not my style. I know it's not either of your styles too. It's like, well, where can we focus on things that we've done well and that have this opportunity to really make an impact, and here's some stories on how it's worked, and then how can people borrow that and kind of build on it. So that's where we've always, that's where the collaboration starts with the conversation comes from anyway. But Sophie, look, your journey has been unique in and of itself too, and you've seen a lot of healthcare in your time. And I'm not sure if I asked you I didn't know you 3 years ago, but if I asked you 3 years ago, where would you be? You probably wouldn't have guessed hosting a health tech podcast. But talk to me about that journey that you've had over the last couple of years.
Yeah, hosting a podcast was never on the 10-year plan in any
not on the vision board.
Wasn't on the vision board. Yeah, look, I guess my journey, as Nathan, it came from a nursing background. I immediately as a grad, I left and I went and did rural and remote. So sort of worked in far-flung places in Queensland, and I did that for a number of years. And while I was out there, I did these other, random things. I did my MBA because, rural hospitals, as some people will know, it's feast or famine. And when it's famine, it's like, how do you entertain yourself for a 10-hour night shift? So I worked on my nursing exit plan, which then sort of decided to leave rural and remote. And I ended up working with Gold Coast Health in a program that they were doing, and my role kind of fell into clinical informatics. So did this clinical informatics. I had no idea what it was. So I had this very steep learning curve and introduction to what digital health could kind of look like, and what you could sort of build from an idea and work with developers and build something that's actually really tangible and follow patients. And I was like, oh my God, this is where I'm going. And then I rolled the dice again and fell into oncology. So I did a number of years in hematology and bone marrow transplants, and then got to the point where I was like, my exit plan's not working. What am I doing? So I decided I was going to jump on a plane. I was having a year off. I was finally going to go and do my gap year. And then it was 2020. So pivot. I ended up in a troopy and traveled around Queensland and the Northern Territory, any state I could kind of get into for a number of months, which led me to Cape York, which then I met some doctors up in Punson Bay who said, you need to come to TI. So then I ended up working on TI in emergency and on the outer islands for 6 months before.
Wait, what's TI? Sorry.
Thursday Island, sorry. So I was up in the Torres Strait sort of exploring these islands in a world, I guess, you don't really get to see unless you're working up there. Like, you don't go there as a tourist. I went and did an outer island stint as the only nurse where, you had to have traditional owner approve that you were going to be there and for how long, and you had to you landed, you went and checked in at the local office, and then you did your time on the island. So these amazing places that I feel very fortunate that nursing took me to go and see these places. And then I ended up back in emergency down here on the Sunshine Coast and was like, oh my God, where is it that I want to go? And I was like, startups and digital health, that's where I want to go. So that led me through a number of conversations to hearing this, you've got to connect him with Talking HealthTech. And I'm like, what is Talking HealthTech? So I bit the bullet and joined as a solo member. And I think I met you, Pete. I took up the opportunity to have like 15 minutes with you. And we just kind of hit it off, which then has sort of led into this last couple of years of hosting. I've done some community management. I love going to all of the events and looking after all of our corporate partners. And I had 18 months of, I think I said yes to everything. I don't think there's much I said no to. Yeah. So sort of ended up balancing quite a lot on the plate and still doing the odd clinical shift just as a little bit of a safety net casually. And now sort of landed with a bit of a portfolio career and working with Graphics et al. In a leadership role there, doing chief of strategy and operations, which is super fun and exciting. And I just think there's so much opportunity there in all of that. So I mean, it's been a very wild ride, I feel.
Yeah.
And throw a few podcast episodes in there.
I forgot to mention when I was talking before, just discussing, your wide-fledged career and, choose the islands and all around.
Tuesday Island next to Thursday Island.
I know. I was like, hey, what have I done here?
It does. It goes Tuesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Oh, I meant to do it, Pete. It was totally fine. Yeah. It was intentional. So just to give you an idea, I was working, my most recent job, I was working in the hospital I was born in, and the majority of my career has been in the same 5-kilometer radius. So I think we've got slightly different experiences there of travels. That's right. On the informatics thing, I got to say, I stepped in a similar sort of thing. My background was a lot of different educational spaces, but that informatics idea in nursing really stood out to me. And again, shout out to all the informaticians out there, CNIOs and whatnot. I got to say, that was a really interesting eye-opener for me and just very different to what I had expected it to be when I got into it. I had this grand vision of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make the EMR better for everybody. And then you sort of walked in and realized all the things stacked against the system. And, there's so much good that needs to happen and so much to be done, but there is so much to be done, to make it better. And, some really interesting things on happening in the moment, particularly in New South Wales, in the EMR space and SDPR and all that coming. It'll be really interesting next couple of years to see happening. But I was the first, so they ended up in the CNIO space, and they went, okay, what's the next thing for me to, not so much necessarily an exit plan or anything, but just it was just so different to what I when I naively walked into it.
Yeah.
The space is so much more complex than I had originally sort of positioned it in my head.
I think about both of your journeys and also mine to an extent. I also think, Ruby and Regina have got awesome stories, so we'll have to get those at another time, but as other co-hosts of the podcast. But, what I think is a common thread, and I'd be interested in your thoughts for, maybe advice for those either clinical or not clinical people that are maybe at early stages of their career, perhaps looking to do more in healthcare and digital looks appealing. It sounds like you're not going to, it's definitely a journey, as they say, because, the start point it's not even an end point to where you are now. There's so many twists and turns and connections that get made that there's no line there. So is the advice just get in and do something, where Sophie said, just say yes to things and work it out? Soph, is that sound advice for others?
I think so. I don't know. I have done so many different things in my career, be that, I've done some business development consulting that sat beside my nursing. I've done some coaching. I've done all these different things that kind of felt like, they could all be standalone things and you could really, but all of that together and that cumulative sort of experience, I think has really put me in good stead to be able to make an impact in the roles and the spaces that I'm hanging out in now. So I don't think, nothing's linear. It's this squiggly line in the middle that adds up to where you end up. So I think if I was giving my younger self some words of advice, I think it would be, say yes, and you lean into those different experiences, because some of them are really positive and some of them are awful, but it's also, there's so many learnings in an awful experience. And which, sorry guys, yeah. Anyway, I think we can cut that little bit. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative, but there's lots of learnings, and it just shows you where you go and where you want to go. And nothing's linear. Nath, what's your take on that?
I don't think that needs to be cut whatsoever. No, honestly, like I think the key point there of what you say is that, like, looking at what the learnings are that happen. So I completely agree, and I've been guilty of the yes man thing for a long, long time. I will count a little devil's advocate, and some advice I'd sort of give my younger self a bit is try to put a little bit of strategy around it, and just thinking about, like, just trying to think what it is you want to do. And, I do a lot of work. You mentioned the coaching. I do some work with the awesome team, James and Jimmy Foxall out of Evolve. And, one of the things Jimmy said to me early on, he gave me a call, and we just sort of sat, we met over a beer, and we're just chatting about, what I want to do when I'm a grown up kind of thing. And that idea of, I guess really thinking about, working for the job you want, not the one you've currently got. So thinking, particularly in nursing, it's a challenge we see a lot of people do. Like, they do their job really darn well. But the fact is, if you want to go to something else and you're going to apply for something higher grade, different specialty, different areas, different field, whatever it might be, there's going to be, so Jimmy calls them credibility indicators. There's going to be things that you need that you won't necessarily have gotten from the current role you're in. So thinking, what are either the opportunities, whether they be formal qualifications, informal experiences, working with Talking HealthTech, like whatever it might be, thinking about what are the bits, what are the things that will bring credibility to you to do the things you want to do. And it's a little bit out of vogue, I must say, in that idea of, going above and beyond in your roles. But I do think in some settings it can be sound advice to go, I'm currently doing this thing. I would like to do that thing over there. Or maybe it's not even a thing over there. Maybe it's just an idea. I'd love to get into the digital space or the whatever it might be, and thinking, well, what are the opportunities I could take now and say yes to? That even if they're not a perfect fit, because I'm not sure exactly what it is, I've at least started to get some of the learnings from it, either to go, my God, I never want to do that again, or, I got this experience. Here's how this project management piece, lined me up for something a little bit different, but, that's still a transferable skill, a credibility indicator that I can take to my next opportunity.
That's such good advice. Yeah.
I agree with you wholeheartedly there, Nath. And I will premise, like, my whole strategy still sits with, like, I'm a fanatic with a Post-it note, and I'm a planner. So I'm like, there's my 5-year, like, this is ultimately what I'd like, but I don't quite, little steps on how you get there. And that has changed. Like 10 years ago, I never thought that this is where I would be. So I, have a plan, but be prepared for the plan to move.
Yeah. Yep. I'm on that journey constantly as well. And I think that, my guardrails are always going to be Talking HealthTech for a very long time, I think. But, I look back at some of the roles I did in, I've only worked in probably 5 or 6 organizations, but at one point I was managing a team of 15 motor mechanics in a roadside assistance department in International SOS, and I ran patient support programs. I ran the Sporting Shooters Association hotline and Ocean Spray, like a lot of consumer type things. I'm like, where is this going? I just took roles that were like team leader roles and supervisors because they came up. And honestly, at one point, it felt like everyone was kind of leaving, the organization. If I just stick around, then there's going to be opportunities that come up when you're early in your career. But then through my career and coming up, I'm like, well, I need qualifications because I don't feel like I'm qualified to be able to do these types of roles. Who am I to, be in this management position? So I did my MBA. I did a freaking CPA, a chartered practicing accountant, because after doing the MBA, I thought I'm not fully confident in running a P&L. I think I probably over-indexed on that a little bit. And I can't say I still have an accountant that does my tax return, but I did the qualification. That was a bit rough too, because there was kids and there was all of the kind of usual things that, make it harder to do other qualifications. So I don't lead with a lot of my qualifications because I don't think they add a lot of value to the conversations that I have, but it does give me context, and I've got sound financial acumen now most times. Well, at least everyone except my wife would say. But then generally, they all those bits along that squiggly line, as Sophie kind of outlined and as Nathan kind of supported too, they all then create this, new opportunities and unique. I forgot the term you used, but I loved it, Nathan. The credibility indicators. That's it. To create your career. So yeah, getting in and just doing stuff. Like you said, Nathan, it's not in vogue. It's because the going above and beyond is kind of not cool at the moment in the back in our day, that was what you did. But
I think
I'm sure there are
maybe-
plenty that do it too.
I just want to like that going above and beyond. You can go above and beyond, and I guess look at it from like even that portfolio space. Like, well, this is what I'm doing in the clinical roles I'm in, but where can I have an impact and go above and beyond that sets me apart with these other skills? And it doesn't have to be in the guardrails of where you work clinically. It could be startup, another firm, anywhere.
And again, I think it comes back to that. There being some strategy behind it, because it's not saying, say yes everything to burnout points and stuff, but it can go, you know what, this opportunity, it's a bit more than I otherwise would have done, but here's why it sets me up to address a gap in my CV, in my experience, in whatever it might be, and that's a worthwhile opportunity that's here. And it is a bit above and beyond, and we might be giving more of myself than I otherwise would have, but it serves a purpose and it fills a gap. And it's not just saying, Pete and I had a running joke from some of our earliest meetings about who could score the most post-nominals. I think I'm up to about 22 letters now.
You win that one now. When you start putting them in front of your name there.
But again, like actually being strategic and purposeful in what those opportunities are and going, you know what, and being willing to disinvest as well, and or not necessarily disinvest in saying these skills are no longer relevant, but going, you know what, I'm probably adequately qualified for my requirements that I see in this, so I don't need to go and do another education thing or whatever. Like,
Nath, is that a really challenging thing as a clinician and coming from a science background? Because I just need another qualification, just things like and it's not, you don't need it, don't need to.
That's definitely the culture, isn't it? And I thought that once I did this qualification, something will change and I'll feel more qualified to do it. And on paper, it's there, but like still, you just got you get the confidence from the doing and throwing yourself in those uncomfortable situations. I love the direction of this conversation, but we are going to need to kind of steer it back in the right way. Maybe we should do more of these kind of riffing ones. We'll have to let the audience let us know. You can put comments on Spotify now and also on the YouTube channel. So do leave us some feedback, or on the Talking Health Tech website. Just reach out to us, support@talkinghealthtech.com, or on socials. You can get us anywhere. So, reflecting then, Sophie, I know you've done a bunch of interviews on the Talking Health Tech podcast. Are there any that stand out for you as like, hey, I'm glad I did that one? I guess I'm going to be cheeky and say I'm glad you did the graphics et al. one, because that probably.
I know. Well, do you know what? That was my very first interview, and when I met Chris, you just like that day threw me into this room in Brisbane and were like, you can interview Chris, and I was like, oh. It was terrifying, but that began this relationship where I met Chris, and now I work with graphics, and that's another, say yes. Like I could have said no, you do it, Pete. Have a crack. I think from the last 12 months, the two that have stood out to me, and they have been, one is Clean Slate. So I interviewed Pia, and they're a social enterprise Clean Slate clinic that address alcohol and drug addiction in regional and remote areas, and it's a telehealth program, so also metropolitan. But I love that what they're using technology to provide services to address health inequities and accessibility. And that really touches my experience from working in rural and remote around the place. And the other one that I thought was, it comes back to sort of that social space again, is MediRecord's partnership with Homeless Healthcare in WA, using cloud-based technology to basically run just laptop GP and running these clinics on the ground for homeless people. I thought was really impressive, and they were feel goods. I liked it. They were great.
Yeah. I think those are good examples of where I'd really like to see the conversation go on the podcast too, and more of this, what's having an impact. Let's hear from those that are like, yes, the technology partner that's involved in it, but also those that are making the impact or have had the impact upon them, like a patient. So definitely look forward to seeing more of those types of conversations here on the podcast. I thought I'd reflect too on where we're going with Talking Health Tech as well in this one, because it'll be interesting to look back, I guess, at episode 1000 in a few years and see what we said in 500 as to what's happening now. So kind of, as I indicated, that we're not going anywhere. Talking Health Tech as the flagship podcast in our kind of stable of stuff that we produce. There'll still be 2 or 3 episodes a week that we collaborate with our company partners with to make sure we're having the conversations that resonate here in Australia and across the world too. There'll be virtual ones, there'll be in-person ones, there'll be ones at events. There'll be me hosting. There'll be Nathan, Sophie, Regina, and Ruby as well. And maybe there'll be more hosts that come in because, it's I feel like having those different perspectives and experiences like you both have just shared add a lot of value to the conversation. But we also produce, for those that don't know, we produce 9 or 10 other podcasts now, in addition to Talking Health Tech, and including the Leukemia Foundation's podcast. We produce Australia's largest GP education podcast called The Good GP. So all of them are separate channels, essentially, that have their own audiences that we help promote and produce and grow. The CCIM podcast, it's been really great seeing Elise in particular, one of the hosts of that show, lean into being a content creator. And I'm sure that's where she wants her career to go full time. But she's well positioned to do that. There's more shows that we're looking to bring on in 2025. And I'm looking forward to, really getting those out. The Consumer Health Partnerships podcast is really cool, hearing how to get the consumer voice into what we do. The Medical Software Industry Association's podcast. So hearing, from the vendor association in Australia about where the big topics are. So I feel like, Talking Health Tech is this catch-all. A lot of people will get value from anywhere, and it's a blessing and a curse, given that our avatar of the typical listener of Talking Health Tech, it's not like it's just the clinician or just, I don't like the word just, but it's just a clinician or a vendor or a whatever. The idea is you're bringing those different voices and perspectives together. So, but then if there's a GP that really wants to dive into the education side, they can go and check out those shows. So we're going to continue to build on that model. And as we've done that too, we've had more and more requests to create other content, not just the audio podcast, but like higher end video content too. So there's a few examples of those already out, but you'll see more of those in 2025 that we're creating. So like customer testimonials and product showcases and things, stuff that you'd see like a typical digital agency, I guess. My running joke is I've accidentally created a marketing agency, but run with it. And it's in the vibe of this conversation, isn't it? But I think what the common thread is on where we say yes to Talking Health Tech stuff is if it helps tell a story and make helps share some of these amazing things that are happening in the digital health ecosystem, but doing them in ways that resonate, and storytelling is a really important way to do that. And I think that if you can attach some of that emotion or the meaning, but like why is this important? You can, and you need all the white papers and the other kind of supporting documents and things like that. But if you can have a human conversation about some of these things and hear from those that it impacts, then I feel like that's really important. So we'll continue to do that, not just for the Talking Health Tech podcast, but for shows in our network and I guess clients that we're creating for, particularly in the health tech space. And that's then also where we're looking at how we then enable some of that more and more, like I guess vertically integrating more and more of it, looking at stuff like facilitating media training. So quite often we'll hear from comms teams or people organizing interviews saying this person knows so much about this space, but they're not, confident, or that they don't want to tell the story, or haven't had their media training. So, I've done a lot actually with you, Nathan, too, as part of, different accelerators and incubators and programs too. And where I usually get brought in is around communication and media training. And I guess given that I've put in so many of the reps of just doing interviews, but also my experience prior to all of this, I feel like there's some value that we can add in facilitating some of the media training stuff. So keep an eye out for what that might look like in 2025. I've also put out on socials, follow me on LinkedIn and Talking Health Tech too, but on my personal account, you'll see I put out a call out of, where are some of the hardest places in Australia to get to that need healthcare. So, to your point, Sophie, you've been to some great locations. So we'll probably have to maybe tag team on some of these if you get the time between all the roles. But being able to go out to some, because I get excited by and I love a shiny thing more than anyone else. And so it's great to hear about, hey, here's AI or personalized healthcare and genomics. All these things are super cool, and we need people working on them. But sometimes I feel like as we get more and more advanced or big picture, it starts to separate from what the problems are that we need to solve in healthcare. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of the problems that need to be solved in healthcare in Australia lie in locations that are difficult to get to, or rural and remote locations, or communities of need. And I don't think the first thing on their list of things they want or need is like an AI avatar or a chatbot or a thing. It's like being able to have a
human with clinical experience
there, or just a a runway to be able to land a plane that isn't also doesn't need to have the cows moved off it, or that isn't also the freeway into the town. So it'd be really interesting to get out to some of these locations, tell some of those stories, given that we've got the audience and the interest, and Australia is such a big country with people located everywhere. I feel like we're well positioned to do that. And we'll keep going out to international locations and hear some of those stories and bring those back to our audience as well. The last thing I'll mention is that community is still a really important part of what we do on the Talking Health Tech side. So our THT Plus membership, we're continuing to that's evolved so much. And you both, we connected, I think, but actually all of the hosts of Talking Health Tech were originally THT Plus solo members. And we just kept that conversation going, and now you're on the show, and we've got 100 or so other members in the community, a good mix of digital health strategists, frontline clinicians, allied health providers, including OC Health, everyone at different stages in their journey, wanting to kind of connect in with others that are like-minded. It might be that you're well-versed in the space and want to share your perspectives, or maybe you're brand new to it and just want to know, what to talk about and what the conversations are. So we'll continue to lean into the THD Plus community, and probably I'll be using that more as a bit of a sounding board for the brains trust of where should we be going with some of this stuff. So if you're interested in that, check out the website, talkinghealth.com/THT Plus, where you can join up as a solo member. But if not, join up on the newsletter too. So there's some of the core stuff in Talking Health Tech I want to make sure we don't forget about too, like our glossary of terms on the website. There's 300 and something terms on our website of just what is an HIE and what is artificial intelligence and what is a general practitioner. So all of this, in every podcast episode we have this long article that goes along with it, because we know some people prefer to read as opposed to watch or listen. So a lot of those glossary terms, I'm keen to make sure they're current and relevant, and starting to lean into a lot of the insights that we've had for over the past 6 years or whatever it is. Well, this is the 7th year of Talking Health Tech. So the glossary of terms on our website, I'm hoping to optimize, as well as the newsletter, make sure we've got value there, because a newsletter is a great way to kind of keep in touch with our broader audience. But having just another newsletter go into your inbox, it's can be a lot of noise too. So how can we, in the same vein, add more value back to the ecosystem through the content we put out there? So lots on the plate, and still, who knows, by the end of the year, maybe none of those ideas come to fruition because we've got a new opportunity that comes up. So I think we kind of leave it there. If I was to kind of let you both reflect on for 2025, where do you think, take your pick. You can either go down the route of where you think the ecosystem's going and the industry, what's going to be the biggest topic conversations, or perhaps where your focus and priority is, and who you want to really engage with too as individuals. Because I know Talking Health Tech is an important part of what you do, but there's other things that you do. So we'll go Nathan, then Sophie, to kind of give some final thoughts.
I think for me, and it probably ties to both, what my passion and goals will be, but also where I think the broader industry is actually better intersection and getting people to play together more, because there's lots of really great ideas, and we are starting to see some more interconnectedness of whether it be academia, healthcare, industry, whatever. But I think just seeing there's so many great ideas going, but we're not seeing them necessarily make it into practical use cases, making a direct impact on patients as much as it could, or clinicians, or whatever it might be. And that's the place I really want to lean into, is trying to help be that conduit. And got some interesting news that may have come out by the time this podcast goes live, but hopefully find myself in a position to better help that, because it is something I'm really passionate about. I've seen these really great ideas in a whole heap of sectors and settings, and it's just just a little bit of connection between people could make the sum of the parts, and all of that could be so much more. So I think that's my passion, is to try and help connect more people together to make good things happen. But also I think it's just more broadly, as the digital health/health ecosystem, we just have to play better together. We can't just keep trying to do our own thing all the time. So
yeah. Love it. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Cool opportunity for you too, Nathan, but that's for another day. Sophie, what about you?
Look, building on that connection and bringing all the pieces together. I would love to see a Talking Health Tech roadshow out to the rural and remote areas, like hear these voices that we don't often hear from, and how those perspectives and their needs really then inform what it is that everyone is building and trying to sort of collectively improve accessibility and health inequities across Australia. And then I guess that has a ripple effect elsewhere as well.
Well, it's where we need to do it, isn't it? So I think that if we can, we've put it on record now, at least.
Yeah,
so that's the
twice.
intention.
You've put it on LinkedIn, and now we've put it here.
Yeah. It's a commitment. So look, here's to another 500, I guess, and let's get back to doing the doing. But it's been great to chat with you, Sophie and Nathan, and looking forward to hearing some conversations that you'll be hosting on the podcast continued, as well as our other co-hosts, Ruby and Regina. And I'm sure we'll be at some event somewhere and catch up in person. Looking forward to catching up with the broader ecosystem to keep those conversations going as well. Thanks, team.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Nate.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys.